You've heard this one in a sermon. Greek has 4 words for love. 2 of them are not in the New Testament. Not once. And the word that takes Peter apart in John 21, the one that actually does the damage, isn't a word for love at all. It's a word for a fire. It appears exactly twice in the entire New Testament. Peter is standing at both of them. Let's do the 4 properly, because the list itself is where the trouble starts. Agapē, the one everybody knows, usually taught as divine love, unconditional love, the highest love. Philia, brotherly love, friendship, affection between people who actually like each other. Erōs, romantic love, desire. Storgē, family love, the quiet, unchosen affection between a parent and a child. 4 words, 4 kinds of love. Tidy. It preaches well, and I never once checked it. Here's the first problem. Erōs is not in the New Testament. Not one verse, not one time. The word that half the sermon is built on never shows up in the book the sermon is about. And Storgē is worse. Storgē never stands on its own either. It survives in the New Testament only in the negative, a word like a storgos, without natural affection, which Paul uses when he's describing a world that has gone cold. Family love appears in the New Testament mostly as a thing people have lost. There's exactly one place it shows up warm, and even there it can't stand by itself. Romans 12 verse 10, Paul tells the church to be philistorgos, toward one another. Look at that word. It's storgē welded onto philia. Family love, bolted to friend love, to make a word for how strangers in a church are supposed to treat each other. Paul couldn't use storgē on its own. He had to fuse it to something else to get it to carry. So the tidy list of 4 has 2 words that are basically ghosts. One that never appears, and one that only appears when it's missing, or when it's holding on to another word to stay upright. So the famous list of 4? In the actual pages of the New Testament, 2 of the chairs are empty, which leaves 2. Agapē, philia, and those 2 are the ones standing on a beach in John 21, while a man who failed badly gets asked the same question 3 times. Hold on to that, because before we touch either of those words, John does something with a detail so small that almost every translation prints it, and almost every reader walks right past it. The Greek word is Anthrakia. It doesn't mean campfire. It doesn't mean a bonfire with flames. It means a bed of charcoal, coals burning low and red, no flame, throwing steady heat. And here's the thing about a charcoal fire. You don't just see it, you smell it. Charcoal smoke gets into your clothes and stays there. It's the kind of smell that arrives before the memory does. Anthrakia appears exactly twice in the entire New Testament. Not twice in John, twice in the whole thing. The first time is John chapter 18, verse 18. It's night in Jerusalem, it's cold, and the servants and officers have made, the text says it plainly, a fire of coals. And there is Peter, standing with them, warming his hands. That is the fire he denies Jesus at. Once, twice, 3 times, standing in that smell. The second time is John chapter 21, verse 9. The disciples drag the boat onto the shore at dawn, and they see, same word, a fire of coals, with fish on it, and bread. Somebody built that fire before they got there. Jesus is standing next to it. Now, think about what that means for the man walking up the beach. Peter smells it before he sees it. He is walking toward the exact smell of the worst night of his life, and the man he denied is standing in the middle of it, cooking breakfast. He didn't ask Peter the question in a neutral room. He rebuilt the smell first. So here's what I want to know, and it's what the rest of this video is about. Why would you do that to someone you love? Why walk a man back into the worst night of his life before you say a single word to him? Because there's a famous answer to that, and I need to deal with it honestly, since it's probably the version you've heard. It goes like this. Jesus asks, Peter, do you agapo me, the high love, the divine love? And Peter, broken, answers with the smaller word, Lord, you know I phileo you. That's all I've got. Twice. And then the third time, Jesus comes down to meet him. He asks with phileo. And that, the teaching says, is why Peter's heart breaks. Jesus lowered the bar to where Peter could reach it. I want to say clearly, that is a beautiful reading, and careful, serious teachers hold it. There's an old tradition of scholarship behind it, and it's not a silly idea. I believed it for years. But I went looking for it in John's own writing, and it started coming apart in my hands. Because if agapo is the divine love and phileo is the lesser one, then John doesn't know that. Watch. John chapter 3 verse 35. The Father loveth the Son, Agapē. Now John chapter 5 verse 20. The Father loveth the Son. Same Father, same Son, same relationship. Phileo. If one of those words is the lesser love, John just used it for the love inside the Trinity. Try again. There's a man in this gospel called the disciple whom Jesus loved. John 13 verse 23. Agapē. John 20 verse 2. Same man, same gospel. Phileo. So the two words are not a ladder in John. They're two hands he uses for the same thing. And now I have to show you the part that ended the argument for me, because it isn't about John at all. It's about what Agapē does everywhere else, when nobody's watching it. If Agapē is the divine love, the holy love, the love that only comes down from God, then the Bible didn't get the memo. Open the Greek Old Testament, 2 Samuel, chapter 13. It's the story of Amnon and Tamar, and it is one of the ugliest chapters in the Bible. A man wants his half-sister, traps her, and rapes her. And when the Greek translators reached for a word to describe what Amnon felt for Tamar before he did it, the word they used was agapao, the divine love word, used for that. Keep going. 2 Timothy chapter 4. Paul is near the end, and he writes one of the loneliest sentences in the New Testament. Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. Demas walked out on Paul because he loved something more, and the Greek behind loved is agapao. And once more, in John's own gospel, chapter 12, verse 43, he's describing men who believed but wouldn't say so out loud because they were afraid of what people would think. And John says, they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. Loved. Agapao. So there it is. In the actual pages of Scripture, Agapē gets used for a rapist's appetite, for a deserter's love of comfort, and for the craving to be well thought of at a dinner party. That is not a word that means divine love. That's a word that means love. And like our word, it takes its temperature from whatever it's pointed at. You can love your wife with it. You can love the applause with it. The word doesn't care. The object does. Which is why I can't put the weight of John 21 on the difference between two verbs anymore. Not because the reading isn't beautiful, because the words won't hold it. And that's before we get to what John does in the John 21 passage itself. Read John 21, 15 to 17 slowly, and the verb for love isn't the only thing moving. John is swapping words all over the place. Jesus says, feed my lambs, bosco, then tend my sheep, poimaino, then feed my sheep, back to bosco. The animals change too. First their lambs, arnia, then their sheep, probata. Even Peter's you know changes. Lord, thou knowest all things, oida. Thou knowest that I love thee, ginosko. Two different verbs for knowing, back to back, in one sentence. So, 4 pairs of synonyms, swapped, in 3 verses. If the love word swap is a secret code, then John is sending 4 secret codes at once, and nobody preaches the sheep one. Nobody stands up on Sunday and explains why the lambs became sheep. There's a simpler read, and it's the one most scholars land on now. This is just how John writes. He varies his words. It's a style, not a cipher. And one more thing sits underneath all of it. Jesus and Peter, standing on a beach in Galilee, were almost certainly speaking Aramaic, the language of their kitchen tables. Aramaic doesn't carry the Agapē philia split. Whatever passed between those two men that morning, the Greek verbs are John's clothing on it, not the thing itself. Now, I want to be fair, and this is where honest people can still disagree. You can argue John chose his synonyms with intent, that a writer this careful doesn't vary words by accident. That's a real argument. I'm not going to pretend it's dead. But here's what I'd say to it. Even if the swap means something, look at how much weight we've been asking it to carry. We built the whole scene on it, and while we were staring at two verbs, we walked straight past a fire that only exists twice in the entire New Testament. Because the cruelty in the question, and I do mean cruelty, the good kind, the surgical kind, isn't in the verb at all. It's in three words that come after it. The first question isn't, do you love me? It's, do you love me more than these? Plion touton. And that phrase has a history. Peter said something once. Matthew chapter 26. Jesus tells them they'll all fall away tonight. And Peter, in front of everyone, says, though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. Read that again. Not, I'll stand. Even if they all run, I won't. More than these. Peter measured himself against the other men in the room and came out on top. And now he's on a beach with those same men standing right there, dripping wet. And Jesus asks him, more than these? He's not being mocked. He's being handed back his own sentence, gently, to see what he'll do with it. And look what Peter does. He doesn't take the bait, not once. Every answer is just, Lord, you know that I love you. No comparison, no ranking. The man who used to measure himself against the room has stopped measuring. That's not a small thing. That's the repair, happening in real time, in what he doesn't say. Then there's the count. 3 questions, 3 answers, 3 denials, at a charcoal fire, in a courtyard. 3 questions, at a charcoal fire, on a beach. Jesus didn't miscount. And then John gives us the line that everybody quotes, and almost nobody finishes. Peter was grieved. The Greek is elipethe, and it's passive. It doesn't mean Peter got moody. It means he was hurt. Something was done to him. He didn't work himself into it. It landed on him. And here's the part I missed for years. John tells us why. It's right there in verse 17. Peter was grieved, because he said unto him the 3rd time, lovest thou me? Not because the verb changed, not because Jesus swapped agapao for philio, because the 3rd time. The text names its own reason. It has been sitting there in every English Bible, on every shelf, in every house, in plain language, for 400 years. And we walked past it to go hunting in a Greek dictionary. Peter isn't crying over vocabulary. He's counting. 1, 2, 3, and on 3, he knows exactly what this is. He's been here before. He said something 3 times at a charcoal fire once already. So let's stand on that beach one more time, with all of it in our hands. A man is walking up out of the water. He is soaked, because when he heard it was the Lord, he jumped in, because that's who Peter is. He moves before he thinks, and it's the same reflex that made him swing a sword, and the same reflex that made him swear he never knew the man. And the smell hits him before he's close enough to see faces. Anthrakia, charcoal. The last time he stood in that smell, he was warming his hands while, somewhere behind him in the dark, they were beating the man he'd promised to die for. And a girl asked him a simple question, and he said no. And then he said no again. And then he said no, a 3rd time. And a rooster tore the morning open, and Peter went out and wept like his chest was coming apart. That is the smell, and Jesus built it again, on purpose, before breakfast. And here's the detail that tells you it was on purpose. When they land, the fire is already burning, and there is already fish on it. Then Jesus says, bring of the fish which ye have now caught. He didn't need their catch. Breakfast was done before the boat touched sand. So the fish weren't the point, and the fishing wasn't the point. The fire was there first. and it was waiting for one man to walk up out of the water and smell it. Now, why? Because Peter didn't need better theology. He needed to say it out loud in the place where he'd said the opposite. 3 times he denied him, standing at coals. 3 times he's asked, standing at coals. Same smell, same number, same man. And this time the answers go the other way. And listen to what he's called while it happens. Not Peter, Simon, son of Jonas. 3 times. Remember who gave him the other name. It was Jesus. Years before, this same man made a confession, and Jesus looked at him and said, "You're not Simon anymore. You're Petros, the rock. I'm building on you." And now the man who handed him that name is calling him by his father's name, the fisherman's name, the name he had before any of it. It sounds like a demotion, like the rock got taken back. Except watch what it's attached to. 3 times he's called Simon, and 3 times, right after, he's handed sheep. Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. He isn't taking the name away. He's rebuilding the man from the ground up, starting at the name he was born with, underneath the promise, underneath the boast, underneath the fire. You don't lay a rock on a crack, you dig down to something that holds. Look at the order. The commission comes after the denial, not instead of it, not by pretending it didn't happen. Through it, through the smoke, through the count, through Peter having to hear his own voice say the true thing 3 times in the exact place his voice had failed. So here's what John 21 is, underneath the sermon. Jesus did not fix Peter by finding the right word for love. He took him back to the fire. And that's the sentence I'd carve on this whole passage. The restoration happened in the same smell as the failure. That's what the charcoal is doing in your Bible. It isn't scenery. It's the whole point, hiding in a noun that shows up twice in the New Testament. Once when Peter fell apart, and once when he got put back together. And I think that's why this passage won't leave people alone, even when they've only ever heard the version about the 2 Greek verbs. Because most of us have a charcoal fire. There's a smell, or a street, or a song, or a room, or a time of year, and when we come near it, we're 24 again and doing the worst thing we ever did. The email you sent, the thing you said to your mother the last time you spoke to her, the way you went quiet when someone needed you to be loud, the version of you that promised, out loud, in front of people, and then didn't. And what most of us do with a place like that is walk around it for the rest of our lives. Here's the part I want to hand you, and I want to be careful with it, because it's the heaviest thing in this story. Jesus walked Peter back in, not to punish him, not to make him grovel. There is no lecture on that beach. Nobody says, "Let's talk about what you did." He builds a fire, he cooks him breakfast, he asks him a question 3 times, and he gives him work to do. Which means, and this is the thing I'd want someone to tell me, your worst night is not your disqualification. Peter's resume at that moment is, publicly denied Jesus 3 times, under 0 real pressure, to a servant girl. And the job he gets is feed my sheep. The whole church, handed to the guy who failed the simplest possible test 6 weeks earlier. If failure disqualified people, that beach would be empty. I want to ask you something, and I read every reply to these. What's your charcoal fire? The place or the smell or the season you still go around instead of through? You don't have to explain it. A few words is enough. Somebody scrolling past is standing at the same one, and it helps more than you'd think to see they're not the only one. So, 3 things to take with you. 1. Greek has 4 words for love, but the New Testament only uses 2 of them. Erōs never shows up. Storgē only shows up missing, or bolted to another word to stay upright. And the one everybody calls the divine love, Agapē, is the same word the Greek Old Testament hands to Amnon, and Paul hands to Demas walking out the door. It isn't a holy word. It's a word that takes its temperature from what you pointed at. If a teaching leans hard on Erōs or Storgē in the New Testament, or tells you Agapē can only mean something pure, it's leaning on a word that won't hold it. 2. The Agapē phileo swap in John 21 is probably John's style, not John's code, because he uses both words for the Father loving the Son, and because he swaps 3 other pairs in the very same breath. It's a lovely reading, it's just not carrying what we've asked it to carry. 3, and this is the one I'd keep. The buried word in John 21 isn't a word for love, it's Anthrakia, a charcoal fire, twice in the whole New Testament, and Peter is standing at both. Once, warming his hands while he lied. Once, eating breakfast while he was made new. Same smell, different man. If this is the kind of study you want more of, the text instead of the noise, subscribe and stay with me. You're the reason this channel can keep digging where everyone else just repeats what they were handed. And if you want the other half of this story, the night at the first fire, the one where a rooster crows and a fisherman's whole life falls in, that's the video I'd watch next. It's the same man, 12 hours earlier, and knowing what you know now, it reads completely differently.